Okay. Good morning. My name is Doris Heaston. I'm working with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial on Share Your Story, and this morning we're interviewing Fred Meyer about his experience in Vietnam. It is Wednesday, October the 18th, about 10:30 in the morning. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm good.
Good to hear that. Want to tell us a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up? A bit about your early life?
I was born actually in July 7th of 1948 in Beatrice, Nebraska. There was, like I said, there was no room in the inn, but they had a corner in the hospital where my mom was born. I was given a end room for me, and excuse me, I've got a hearing aid that's got a problem. It has to come out every once in a while. But anyway, born and raised in west of Plymouth on a farm. Went to grade school, District 17 by Plymouth, west of Plymouth, and I went into high school at Plymouth High School. And actually I graduated in 1966. It was it was the first year, or there was the first year that Tri-County was formed, the end of November. So actually one of the people that signed my diploma was was the Board of Education of Tri-County itself. So I was the last class to graduate from Plymouth High School, and I've managed to take hold of that since.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Did you have any part-time jobs during that high school? Did you do any, work for pay or volunteer things during that time?
I was mostly during the summer, was either helping my dad with irrigation, or I was getting paid for baling hay, stacking bales and baling hay. So managed to work my way through school that way.
Okay. Do you have any siblings growing up?
I had an older brother. At that time, he's like 3 years older than I am. And then I had several. I had an older sister and then two older brothers that were ahead of me in school.
So are you the baby of the family?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to hear. So what did you do after high school?
I went to college and everything, and I actually was, I went out for football, and I did have, when I was in high school my senior year, I had a torn knee, and which let me out till the end of the year when I played. And then only years later did they have it taken out of me, the part of the knee. So other than that, I had ended up quitting college football because of a torn knee, and decided to go into full-time recreation, which was going to school and drinking beer.
And did you get good grades in that?
No, actually I didn't. I think I was encouraged by my parents to take a step back and work at I worked at Tractor Supply Company in Beatrice after I worked for a farmer. I figured out I could get paid more working at Tractor Supply than I was working for a farmer, even though I got good food, but it just didn't pay very well.
Okay, and then how did you end up going into the military?
I had friends of mine that we met at a bar one night, and we all decided that we should go into the military at first opportunity. And I woke up the next morning with a hangover, and I went into Beatrice and signed up for the army. The army recruiter was in Beatrice, and they didn't inform my recruiting station in Jefferson County that I was being drafted. So when I was in the service, when I was in basic training, I was actually drafted by the Jefferson County Selection Service, and I was informed by my parents through a letter that I would be inducted into the armed forces in April of that year. Since I was number 50 in the draft, and I could have went very early. In fact, I did go. I went. I was selected that time, inducted, and I was already in basic training. So my dad had to inform the selective service that they could no longer have my services because I was already there.
You mentioned that you were with a group of friends at the bar. Did any of them also go enlist, or were you the only one?
I was the only one. The other 3 out of 4, I was the 4th one that actually went. 3 of them, 1 was drafted, and 2 of them, all 3 of them actually were drafted. 1 of them served at Fort Riley, Kansas, and was stationed in Denver, Colorado, at a place in Colorado. I can't remember the name. And then went overseas to Germany. And then 1 of them actually was drafted, got sent to Vietnam, and then I visited him it was at Benoit actually. He was a truck driver then. And then the 3rd one actually was actually at Fort Riley, Kansas, and he was he was nurse's aide at Fort Riley.
Do you still keep up with those men?
Well, 1 of them is actually have passed on, and the other 2 are I have kept close with them over the years. 1 lives in Beatrice, and the other one lives in Plymouth.
Okay, so you all came home. That was just sort of a side interest. Let's go back to your military. What kind, after basic training, where did you go and what did you do?
I went from Fort Lewis, Washington to Fort Ord, California, and I went from Fort Ord, California to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, and from there to home, and then I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and then my final duty station was in Long Binh, Vietnam.
What was your
It's not. Oh.
What was your MOS or specialty in the Army?
71 L30. It was a personnel management specialist, glorified clerk position.
Okay, so what exactly did you do at Long Binh?
I took care of officer records and higher enlisted records for Engineer Command.
Any particular incidents or things that happened there that you can remember that might be particularly interesting or funny?
I learned how to, I played handball, I played racquetball, had my hands swell up on me after a while playing handball. And when I played football in a swimming pool, and I came over the top of one guy, came down and chipped my tooth, which when the bleeding finally stopped, they said I could get it capped back in the U.S. when I got done. So at the time I was just letting it go, and came back to the United States and had it capped, and it finally broke off here about 4 or 5 years ago. That's the only time it ever broke off for me, and then I had it recapped again in Beatrice.
So it lasted a pretty long time.
It lasted a pretty long time.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about a typical day at Long Bin.
The day was, I usually got up in the morning, and I usually went for a stroll or did some running, had breakfast at the Camp PX, and I went to work. We went by truck up to the hill. They call it up on the hill. It was a place that was 300 foot long and had 2 stories to it. And it was air conditioned the whole time I was over there. And I went, was upstairs in an office up there the whole time. And back of me were 2 young looking women that were daughters of officers that were in the South Vietnamese Army. They were like lieutenants or captains, and they were pretty good looking women that were clerk typists.
And how long was your work day?
Usually it was probably about 8 to 5. And usually there was, I had weekends off where we would play basketball after it was over with, and then we had movies in the backyard. And we drank a little bit of beer, had a little bit of wine, and played basketball.
Did your job take you anywhere else in Vietnam? Did you have to go? Was the engineer command scattered throughout the country? Did you have to go to any of those units to do anything related to your job?
Yes, I had to. I had to do some military stuff. It had to do with what is it now?
Are you thinking maneuvers, or are you thinking related to their records?
Well, I had to do maneuvers. I had to do some things that were along with doing some things with the Army. It was I had to go out on maneuvers outside the base. Usually during the daytime we would go out and patrol the outside of it. I usually did them a few times in the year, and there was actually in front of us, there was a farm where they raised pigs, and behind us was a ammo dump that was guarded by a tank. Didn't have anybody in it, but it was guarded by a tank.
Interesting. What were your living conditions like at Long Bin?
It wasn't too bad. they had a hooch, two-story hooch. The bottom of it, they had women that would come in during the daytime and wash our clothes and lay them out on the sun to dry them, and they were bleached, and in order to get them to really look good, and they hung them up and everything. And then they also had some stuff they cooked during the daytime for their noon meal. It was called Nookbaum, and it was really some stuff that didn't smell bad, but it was nasty looking. And it was actually they would catch fish, put them in a barrel, and let them ferment. And when they'd scoop the fish off the bottom of it, they would use that in their Nookbaum, and the bottom of it they would scrape off and put it in there for fertilizer.
Do you remember what these women were called?
Mamasans.
And you used the term hooch earlier. For people who may be listening or watching this at another time, do you want to explain what a hooch is?
That's actually a building that was probably about, I would guess, maybe 60 foot long. And again, it was like two-story. And it had the upper side of it, or the top side of it had regular, I would call it apartments in it, or places where they would have a closed doorway. The bottom part of it had one too. I do remember too, they had some stray dogs that would come through. They would be our pets, and weren't very friendly to the Mamasans, but they really were pretty friendly to the GIs because we fed them all the time. I do have to remember one thing though, that now I can't remember. I'm going to have to recall here a little bit.
This is your story. You speak whenever and whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Did you ever get to go anywhere in Vietnam not related to work? Like during off duty, were you allowed into the village or into Saigon at all?
During my time there, since I was a truck driver, I volunteered to run their deuce and a halves, and we'd load up some personnel, and we would take them down to over Christmas, and we had a little bit of a Christmas party for the orphans that were there. Kind of a good old time, but I remember some of the people that were with me. Sometimes their faces I can't remember, but the pictures and their names I do remember. But we had a good time, and I would drive them down there and drive them back.
Are you in contact with any of the men you served with? Are you still in contact with any of those men in the engineering group?
Some of them I are. We got together here a few years ago in Washington, D.C., and it was mainly through a friend of mine who was out of Louisiana, who has since passed away. But he organized it and everything, and got us together in Washington, D.C. for a reunion. And it was a big one, because there was a lot of them that were there. And then we had several reunions since, but now that he's passed away, it's kind of has fallen off.
You know, it occurred to me that for this interview, what was your time frame in Vietnam, month, year? Would you tell us what your time frame in Vietnam was?
Well, I actually served from the end of April of 1971 to the end of April of 1972. Now, I also will say that during the time I was there, I volunteered to escort prisoners to the airport, and one time I was given the duty of going to, and I didn't know it at the time, but they got this rather large black gentleman came out of the it was called the LBJ Long Bin jail, and he was handcuffed, and immediately the guy handcuffed me to him, got inside the Jeep, and we drove our Jeep over to it wasn't Benoit, it was Saigon, to Tan Son Nhut. And in the meantime, when we got there, I decided, since he was much bigger than we, that if we had to go to the bathroom, I would go to the bathroom with him. So I carried his records with him up to the plane, and then he was handcuffed again to somebody else on the plane, and he was escorted back to the United States. You couldn't at that time end your ETS, end term of service, in Vietnam. You could do it in the United States and then fly on your own personal expense over to Vietnam. He didn't realize that. He thought he could just get out, go away, and show up at a village, but he couldn't do that. So they put him in jail, and then he was escorted to the plane and back to the U.S.
Did he try to come back again, do you know?
I don't know. I personally don't know. I also volunteered sometime because these mama sons would clean the offices, so you always had to inspect what they were doing and who they were doing, and they'd always come up to you with they always church beech nut, and they'd always have brown or blackened teeth, and they would show you they would smile and show you their teeth. So it's pretty amusing at the time that that's what they had, chewed beech nut gum.
Any other interesting things you volunteered for?
Well, I did do some guard duty. I did guard duty, and I did some with towers and with what were they?
The perimeter?
Something to do with the perimeter. But anyway, they would do an all-nighter and get off in the morning. And the towers we overlooked some Constantino Noir, and they had cattle lights on. They would also have patrols that had helicopters. They had some helicopters that had single lights on them, and then they had Cobras that would follow up behind them, and if they saw something they worked out. So we had some exploding, some machine gun fire, and also some with some machine guns. About every 10 to 20 rounds was something that would light up the machine, the gun itself. So
Was Long Bin ever under attack while you were there?
they were, in the time I was there, before that, like in 1968, I think it is, 10 offenses of 68, they did overrun parts of Vietnam. And but other than that, they were well fortified after I got there. So they were fortified within the compound. They had a military compound within them that was also guarded by their own sets of soldiers. And I actually had a man that he was a general's aide. He worked for a general when he was there, and he used to bring a jeep along down with us so that we got access to a commissary. So sometimes we would have steaks on the weekend, all part of the job.
You must have been reading my mind, because my next question was about the food. How was the food?
Food was pretty good. And at times it wasn't too good, but generally speaking, it was all right. And we had some good cooks over there, and made our life palatable. So.
Okay. Had you volunteered for Vietnam, or were you ordered to Vietnam?
I had my order papers down that I was supposed to be sent there. And the reason why I got out is because President Nixon, ordered a troop withdrawal from Vietnam. And actually the first thing that comes down through the wires were the telegraph wires, were the drops. And if you were like a 30-day or 60-day or 90-day drop, you would put in for college, they would accept you, and then you would get the drop when you got out. Well, in the case of me, I was a 3-year or 4-year RA. With the 3-year RA, if you had more than 1 year in, and you had served, what was it, more than a year of service, and if you came back with less than a year in, you could get out early. I served, in order to be over there, I had served over my 12 months. I actually was in the military, or in Vietnam, for over a year. So when I got back to the States, I got out 352 days early. I actually served 2 years and 3 days in the service. So I actually was a military guy who served for 2 years and 3 days.
RA, again, this is going to be viewed by people who have no understanding of military abbreviations. You use the term RA. Regular Army.
Regular Army, that's what it is. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we're here. So when you got home, you did you have still time in the service, or just processing out?
I processed out at Oakland, and it was really at Oakland. I met up with some very interesting people. They were the people that were not exactly friends to me. They had there was some people that were not happy with what I did. They were protesters, and they it's a sad part of my life because they protested against me. When I got off, they actually spit in my face and called me baby killers, and wasn't a very good time for me when I was coming back from the service. But I got back into Omaha, Nebraska, where people were friendly to me, and then I got my way back into civilian life.
And what did you do when you came back to Nebraska?
I applied for the job at first. I applied for the job at Tractor Supply Company, and then I reapplied for a job at Northern Natural Gas Company north of Beatrice, and got on there for a while until they finally cut me when they had a reduction in force.
Looking back, how do you feel about your military experience? I mean, do you think it was valuable? Did you learn things, or?
Well, at the time I was pretty upset about it, because it really, I was drafted. I had nothing to do with it, and I was sent overseas, put in a war zone, read all kinds of newspapers, and basically I was kind of tired of what I was listening to and reading about. So in the end I was very sad about it, but years later, when things started to come about, I appreciated my time in the service. And then when I got to the point where people were very appreciative of what I was doing, I felt a sense of satisfaction and pride in what I decided, especially since I joined when I joined the American Legion. My father-in-law was the one who got me to join the Legion, and a good friend of his helped sponsor me in the Legion, helped pay for my first year, and then I decided to keep going, and I've been in the Legion for, I would say, 40-some years. I had went through I would say the chain of command. I went up from being, I was commander for a while, vice commander, and then I ended up later on being the treasurer, and I was also the sergeant at arms. But really proud of what I've become over the years, and really, especially now during November, I get a lot of thank yous, and thank you for your service from my fellow people and from just around the world that acknowledge me. I do have one thing though, that I do wear a cap for this purpose that kind of advertises that I'm from Vietnam, and I have somebody who doesn't even know who I am, but maybe they are. They come up and shake my hand, and we get on a discussion of where I was at, and then they know that I've been there. and they have been there, and they have served, and I have served. And then we have this common bond. We have this friendship that starts that I know that he is someone. He might have been an officer, he might have been enlisted, but he had served with pride, and I have served with pride.
That's very special, thank you. Have you spoken about your Vietnam experience to your family?
I have told them when they ask. Some servicemen won't say anything about it, and I have a real respect for them if they don't care to talk about it. That's their right, but I do talk about it. I have some good experiences with it, and I really have come down to enjoying the time I spent there. I will also have to say that as being a sergeant at arms, I've been able to participate in funerals and in parades, and I've enjoyed that fact. That brings me out a sense of pride, sense of joy, knowing that I can serve my country in ways.
Thank you. Did you, going back to the American Legion, because I have heard this from other veterans, did you sense any resistance from some of the members, some of the older members perhaps who had served in World War II or Korea, to your participation as a Vietnam veteran?
Well, I'd have to give thanks to my father-in-law for paving the way for what I could do, because he was a World War II veteran who had served in Germany. He was a soldier that was with, he was a paratrooper, jumped at the Bay of Pigs, jumped at
D-Day.
he jumped at D-Day. He
Battle
also,
of the Bulge.
he jumped at the Battle of the Bulge, and he also, at the time that he was over there, he served as a driver for General Patton when he was there, so he had a kind of a colorful history about himself, so he got some respect from his fellow soldiers, did a lot of good things for the Legion down there, and through him I was able to embrace the fact that I was respected man, and it showed all the way down to where I am, and then I was accepted as to who I was with the American Legion, and I ended up being the post commander at the time, and then worked my way up from there to where I am today as the treasurer of the post number 243.
Well, that's great. In conclusion, is there anything else you would like to add or say for this interview about your military experience, your Vietnam experience, life in general? This is about you.
Well, the only thing is I managed to have something that is with this disease that I have now, this Agent Orange. I have type 2 diabetes, and it has come on to me, I would say, suddenly. I have been able to cope with it, but through the I guess I would call it an eye-opening experience, that I've been able to get some things through the military that I didn't have before. It's opened up to the VA hospital, like the Douglas County Medical Center, and places that were shut out to me because of the time that I spent there and the things that I've managed to open up to me. I've been able to serve through the VA and through not only in Washington D.C. but outside there, and I've gotten great people who've worked for me to help me through my medical experience. I'm very appreciative of this, even though I have a disease that I think is to a certain point controllable, but I have just a general pride that I'm a true Vietnam veteran, and we have Vietnam veterans reunions that I've attended with my wife, Deb, and if not for her, I wouldn't have had this stroke, and I wouldn't be where I'm at right now.
Okay, thank you. Deb is here with us. Do you have anything to add, Deb?
Just that I'm very proud of him.
Okay, we are going to conclude this interview. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll tell me to go.
It is October the 18th. We are putting an addendum onto the interview with Fred Meyer, Vietnam veteran. My name is Doris Heaston for the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Fred, tell us about your R&R in Australia, please. Go ahead, Fred. Tell us about Australia.
Sorry.
That's okay. Got distracted there.
We were on the last flight to Sydney, Australia. I had connections because of that. We flew up to Da Nang, stayed overnight at a Big Red infantry base, and then flew out the next morning to Sydney. Flew into Sydney then, got off the plane, and we just kind of went our separate ways. Had a good time in Sydney, and up and down the King's Cross area, celebrated some things. That night, I was walking down Sydney, I had a gal on my arm, and a photographer come out and said, "Can I take your picture?" And I said, "Sure." And I had two gals, they came up and kissed me on either side. And he says it might not go into the paper the next day, but I hope for the best. So the next day when I got on the airplane, I sat in my seat and a stewardess come up and says, "Would you like a paper?" I said, "Sure." So she hands me a tabloid, and it wasn't on the front page, but when I turned the page, it was right there. And then it got back to the U.S. It got back to Plymouth, Nebraska. Actually, it was out of Lincoln. It was channel at the time. I call it channel 10 and 11. That it was channel 10 at the time. That they says, you know, if anybody would like to know, here is an Army veteran from Vietnam celebrating his time in Sydney, Australia. And then the picture of it, I've cut it out for him, and I've cut it out, and I've actually lost it over the years. surprising. But should have had it in plastic. But I have also come to thank some of the gals that were over there at the time. They were as young as I was at the time, so got back on the plane again and flew back there. But it was I had a nice time when I was over there. Fond memories. Thank you.
Thank you, that's a great story. I wonder if you contacted the newspaper archives, if they might have that picture.
It's very possible that they could.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I hope we get to add that to your interview.
You're very welcome. Thank you.